I've been paying state income tax for 45 years, so I think it'd be a nice thing to get rid of.
If we have to get taxed on other things that we don't normally get taxed on, it might not be so great.
Updating and modifying that sales tax code to make sure it's on a fair and level playing system enables us to give Missourians their money back through the income tax cut.
Eventually, common day items, including medicines, may become too expensive to afford.
I would love it. Put more money in my pocket.
I don't think it's a good thing. It would add on to other expenses.
From a socioeconomic standpoint, the poorest people suffer the most.
Welcome to Amendment 5, Your Money, Your Choice. I'm investigative reporter Lauren Traeger. In this program, we're going to be helping to inform you about a major ballot initiative that will impact every single Missourian. We want to give you an in-depth look at both sides before you head to the polls for Election Day, August 4th. So let's start with what is Amendment 5? Well, in the simplest terms, Amendment 5 would phase out Missouri's individual income tax over time based on revenue triggers and allow lawmakers to then change other types of tax structures to account for the change in state revenue. But there is a lot more to it than that, and a lot of heated debate on both sides about how it would be implemented if passed. So let's take a look at the big picture of Missouri's income tax. The amount collected, of course, does vary every single year, but right now Missouri is expected to collect around $8.5 billion in income taxes. That does make up close to 2/3 or more than 60% of the state's overall general revenue every year. The state's general revenue funds everything from education to infrastructure, prisons, healthcare, and more. So how exactly did this get on your ballot? Well, it was priority number one for Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe when he took office, and I sat down with him in Jefferson City as he explained why. So let's take a look. What exact problem do you believe that this will solve for the state of Missouri?
Well, number one, we ran on having a different tax code here in Missouri for our Missouri citizens. And if you want to look at our state in the form of a business, we need to be competitive with the competitors around us, the other surrounding states. We think that giving Missourians more of their money that they earn to keep in their pocket is better for their families, but it also helps improve our economy.
Okay, so let's really dig into what Amendment 5 could actually mean for you. And I'm grateful to be joined by a panel of guests here. They're seated in alphabetical order. So on the side of those against Amendment 5, we have Amy Bluen of nonprofit Missouri Budget Project, Scott Charton, who represents several groups opposing Amendment 5, including the Missouri Association of Realtors. Then on the right here, we have the people who support Amendment 5, Missouri State Representative Bishop Davidson and Dr. Aaron Headland, an economist who is currently a member of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Thank you all so much for being here. We do appreciate your time. So before we do get started, though, just a couple of quick ground rules for all of you and for people out there who are watching. This is not a timed debate, not very structured. It's a roundtable discussion, but we will aim to give both sides a chance to be heard, a fair chance. And for that reason, we do ask you all that you don't speak over each other. And while we encourage discourse, we will make sure that it remains civil, of course. And so we want to get right into it right now, starting with, of course, the big picture of this and the reason that this is out there. So for our supporters here, give us this big picture. Why do you believe phasing out Missouri's income tax is the right thing for the state?
Yeah, no, I think phasing out Missouri's income tax is right for the state. It's actually something we've been doing. And during this roundtable, there's going to be a lot of numbers tossed out. You got to remember those numbers are being calculated a lot of times by the same organization that said that our reductions in income taxes were going to cost us $1.35 billion. And in fact, it generated us more revenue, $2.6 billion, as we went from 6% to 4.7%. The same organization said that it was going to increase our revenue by $118 million to pass Amendment 2, Medicaid expansion, which has actually cost us hundreds of millions of dollars. Even the $8.5 billion number I saw, that's $7.8 billion. That's the accurate, right, correct number. But when we're talking about eliminating income taxes, we're talking about supercharging the benefits that Missouri has seen over the last decade of reducing income taxes and actually getting us all the way to zero so that we can stop discouraging growth in this state and start encouraging economic activity, economic opportunity, increasing wages, lowering prices, all those things, because affordability is one of the biggest issues of our day.
And just to add to that, 100 years ago, St. Louis was the fourth biggest city in the country. Now St. Louis is out of the top 20, and Dallas and Houston are competing for top 4. And you see Nashville rapidly rising. If you look at the past 25 years, Missouri has been, generally speaking, bottom 10 in economic growth. So economically, the state is not doing well. But then you look at places like Florida, you look at places like Tennessee, you look at places like Texas, they're growing very rapidly. So the biggest reason to do this is to grow the pie. The second reason to do this is that right now the tax code in Missouri is very rigged. If you're a working class, middle class, paycheck to paycheck worker, you face the double everything tax. First of all the money you earn is taxed by the income tax. Then you go to the store and you're taxed by the sales tax. Meanwhile, you could be someone, and if you're a business, by the way, that existed decades ago, you're facing a tax. But if you're in an industry that has been more recent, you're not taxed. If you look at someone who's amassed millions upon millions of dollars, they probably don't face much of an income tax, and they don't even face much of a sales tax either, because a lot of the luxury services they face aren't taxed. So it's about fixing the system and increasing growth.
Scott, your response, and why do you think Amendment 5 is no good for Missouri?
Well, we heard a lot of numbers there, but one thing I didn't really hear in any of that is the sales tax, which is what this is really about. In order to achieve what they want to achieve, they don't have to amend the Constitution to eliminate the income tax. You can go to zero on that today, but it'll bankrupt the state. You have to make up that revenue. Let's say it's $8 billion, $8.5 billion. At this point, it's just a huge amount of money to most of the working folks out there to even contemplate. This requires raising the rate of sales tax, and it requires expanding the base to include services which are not now taxed in Missouri. I work with the Missouri Realtors. They help put into the Constitution, with the support of a citizens coalition, not having a tax on buying or selling a home. That passed with 83.7% in 2010. And in 2016, the Realtors proposed, coalition came together, and we put on the ballot and passed no sales tax on services that you use every day, from a haircut to a car repair.
And we are going to break down in just a few moments some of these things that you're talking about specifically, what may or may not be taxed. I know we want to get into all of those details. Amy, I just want to quickly give you your sort of initial thoughts here.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So there's so much to say here, but let me just start with the explanation of what this is. And as Scott said, the lawmakers that we currently have the ability to eliminate the income tax if they want to. And as Bishop said, that they have been doing that over the last decade. We have cut the income tax from 6% down to 4.7%. So that has already happened, and it has not created growth in the state. We are not spurring the economy. That magical growth isn't happening. And in fact, the only reason that we didn't see the budget bottom out is because we got lucky. The National Association of State Budget Officers released a report this summer that indicated, all of the states had historic growth in general revenue because of other factors, because of COVID relief, because of wage growth, because employers were hiring following COVID. All of those things happened across the country, and it boosted the revenue coming into all of the states. Now Missouri is one of only 11 states that do not have revenue growth, that were not meeting the actual estimate of what was expected prior to this budget year. We're one of only 11 states where that's happening. And I know we'll get into talking about why we shouldn't compare Missouri to other states and apples to oranges and that sort of thing. But what we're being asked to do is pass a constitutional amendment that would give lawmakers the ability to greatly expand and increase the sales tax with no details whatsoever.
Excuse me. Our economy has grown from 46th to 41st. Now, 41st isn't nothing to write home about in the time that we've been reducing income taxes. And our revenues, you said we're going to get down. You said it was going to be a $1.3 billion loss back in 2015. And the exact opposite occurred. Our revenues are up $2.6 billion in the same timeline that you had set out. The Missouri Budget Project, Scott had mentioned an initiative from 2016. The Missouri Budget Project was against that initiative in 2016. And the reason why is because it is unfair. It's loopholes getting codified in the Constitution. It was manipulative of a tax code. And that's what we're trying to fix.
So I love how we've gotten into this point the finger game right at the beginning, right at the start of this conversation. And as I said, there's a reason for that. We got lucky. We got really lucky with revenue
There's
growth.
a reason for you having been against that.
There is a reason that revenue grew, and I already mentioned it, that the National Association of State Budget Officers, totally nonpartisan across the nation, put out a report that anybody can look up. And it says the reason for revenue growth, historic growth in the states, is because of factors that were outside of.
You said it would go down. You said it would go down, and it hasn't.
And now it's time to pay the piper.
It hasn't gone down.
It's starting to.
I do appreciate that our conversation has already gotten spirited. I appreciate it. Again, I think we'll be able to kind of break down some of these various topics and make sure that you guys get to speak on them. There have been a lot of questions about how the income tax would actually be phased out. And one of the biggest questions, as you guys have already talked about here, is what might be taxed in the alternative. And I know we want to talk about some of those things. Of course, you already mentioned too, goods are taxed, services largely are not taxed. And we did talk to one person who is opposed to Amendment 5 about that. So take a listen to what he had to say.
When it comes to just regular services, going to the barber shop, the beauty shop, you know, digital subscriptions, they can begin to tax all of those things. So do we want to give them that sort of unfettered power? And I don't want to.
Okay, so let's start right there for you guys who are opposed to this. Is part of what you've said that this is a vote now, details later plan? Is that part of the concern that voters don't have the exact information on what might be taxed in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the show me state. You know, Missourians are used to voting on the details with tax policy issues all the time. And what this does is ask us to just trust politicians to make up the numbers later. And I think that it really points to a question that I have. Why does the other side not share details? There's no detail about what the rate would go to. There's no detail about what would be subject to tax, what services, what products. They just want us to trust lawmakers, and not just the lawmakers who are currently elected, but politicians yet to come who would be elected in the future.
And Aaron, why not put together?
First of all, can you tell me where in the Missouri Constitution does it list the income tax rates?
In the Missouri Constitution, it says we have the Hancock Amendment.
No, right? The numbers aren't in
there.
The
numbers aren't
Where
in there.
Where does it list the standard deduction in the Missouri Constitution?
But the ability of Missourians to vote on tax increases is in the Constitution.
No, so
that is taken away with this for a 5-year period.
Let's actually go there. So first of all, what is currently allowed? Right now, if the legislature wanted to, they could raise the sales tax rate. Right now, if the legislature wanted to, they could increase the overall tax burden by $100 million without a vote of the people. Right? Since 2019, spending has doubled in the state. That's what the current protections are not doing a good enough job of doing. What would Amendment 5 actually do? What Amendment 5 would actually do is it would control the spending. It would prevent the kind of overspending we've seen. In fact, if Amendment 5 had been in effect since 2019, we'd likely have a mid-3% income tax rate instead of a 4.7% tax rate. Moreover, if there are any sales tax loopholes that are closed that the legislature pursues, not a single dollar of that can go to Jefferson City. Every single dollar has to go back to Missourians. So this is actually a restriction on what a government can do. It is not something that gives them any more power.
Hold on a minute. Hold on. You guys talk awful fast. I'm going to spell this out so everybody can understand. We have constitutional safeguards that were put in the Hancock Amendment.
What do they say? 2010.
Do you know
what they
say?
say?
Realtors, excuse me, yes.
Yeah.
I know what they say because I helped put two of them in, 2010 and 2016, to give the taxpayers protections, to bar what you want to do, which is to increase the sales tax on services folks use every day, and the rate. Now, they think it's very important to get rid of the income tax, but they don't need the amendment to do that. They need this amendment, Amendment 5. They need it to be able to blow off and have a license to ignore these constitutional protections. The people supported.
That is
83.7%.
Objectively not true. And you actually worked on the side against that amendment in 2016. So to act like you helped to put it in
I worked against it.
But here
I helped. We debated it. She disagreed and I was for it. You got your facts wrong, but then their facts
No, the
wrong
Missouri
in all of
Budget
this.
Project's against it.
I don't work for Missouri Budget Project. I work with the Missouri Realtors to pass the 2016
Amendment, and the
He doesn't
Hancock
even have his
Amendment
basic
says
facts right.
Reminder, let's not talk over each other. Thank you very much.
Yes,
The
we'll get your
Hancock
facts
Amendment that says that revenues can't go up without a vote of the people. Amendment 5 says that the government can't grow. Anytime the legislature proposes a revenue-generating proposal, it still has to go to a vote of the people according to Amendment 5.
Let me ask you, though, Bishop and Aaron, real quickly. I mean, why not have presented a plan to the voters that said exactly what would have happened moving forward?
Yeah, I filed the bill first as a joint resolution and a bill, right? And ran them parallel. If you look back in Missouri records, you find this happening twice. The courts threw it out one time. So it was a 50-50 crapshoot. And we decided the more responsible path forward was to put a constitutional amendment before the people that had clear guardrails in place that could predictably show us where we could go and what we could accomplish.
The other thing is,
like to point out,
what is a constitutional amendment? Like, what does the Constitution do? It sets in place what are the protections and the guardrails for the tax system, right? The standard deduction is not in the Constitution. The tax rates are not in the Constitution. The tax code is like hundreds of pages. Like, that is not in the Constitution. So the question is, what rules should we play by? And right now in the Constitution, the legislature, unfortunately, has the ability to raise taxes. They have the ability to jack up the sales tax rate, to raise the overall tax burden, to grow the government. All those things have happened. So what Amendment 5 does is it puts in place a different set of rules. And it's a set of rules that says we have to control spending. We cannot continue to double the budget the way we've been doing. It says that if we do close sales tax loopholes, not a single dollar of that can stay in Jefferson City. So that's the kind of protections that this provides. And again, if this were in effect since 2019, we would have a much lower tax rate than we currently do.
Okay, so let me respond to this, because I still haven't heard anything about what the rate's going to be or anything about any details about what would be subject to tax. And I know that Missourians are smarter than you seem to believe that they are. Missourians know lawmakers cannot increase the taxes that the state collects without a vote of the people over a substantial amount.
This doesn't change that.
And the substantial amount is around $100 to $150 million per year. That's why you see things like the tobacco tax going to a vote of the people, and it's gone to a vote of the people several times, and the people have said no. But in our Constitution, what you are saying is, give us lawmakers the authority to make a larger tax increase than that. Just trust us. We're not going to give you the details.
I have not heard a lawmaker say trust us once. You know why? You know why?
Because nobody does. Nobody trusts you.
We believe in the Constitution and a constitutional framework, and this constitutional framework doesn't allow what you just said. It doesn't allow for revenues. It doesn't allow for the government to grow.
Constitutional framework that's in place now.
It doesn't allow for revenues to increase
Let's
without
get a little more
vote of the people.
granular, and I do want to move on so that we can do that. So let's try to dig down a little bit more into what the potential changes could look like and what, if anything, would still be off limits tax-wise into the future. We actually did ask Governor Kehoe about that exactly, and here's what he had to say about that. You have said, though, no increases for agriculture, healthcare, or real estate.
That's correct.
Can you guarantee that?
I can guarantee that. I will not sign a bill that has any of those increases or changes to what they currently have in the tax code system. And I can tell you that we have a General Assembly that appreciates those three industries as well. I don't think anything would even get close to my desk with it.
Okay, Bishop and Aaron, you heard what the governor said there. Those three areas, though, are pretty broad. Can you guarantee that you would not touch those in the future?
Absolutely, unequivocally.
How would you not be able to do that with the loss of revenue from the income tax?
How would you not be able to do that with the loss of revenue from the income tax?
Explain.
By using growth over time, right? And by using replacement responsibly. This is just about phasing in, and that's why it says at the beginning, we're phasing out the income tax. That phase out allows us to use growth. It allows us to use replacement revenue responsibly in a way that makes sense and in a way that promotes growth instead of discouraging growth.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out, the tax rate has already come down from 6 to 4.7. Right? So this is about taking that and then accelerating the process and guaranteeing it, because no one can commit to the fact that in several years the legislature is going to still have great people like Bishop there. So that's why you need in the Constitution a guaranteed protection that the income tax is going to go to zero.
Well, I've got to correct this. You don't get a dime of income tax relief until after the sales tax has been boosted, and it would be the largest tax increase in Missouri
That's
history.
not true.
It is true.
It says in the same piece of legislation that offsets have to be in the same piece
He's
of legislation.
playing hide the sales tax.
No, it's subdivision 2, subsection 2 of section 26. It's the bottom of page 2. I know exactly where it's at.
It's hide the
it
sales
literally
tax.
says that the offsets have
Say
to be
it,
in the
sales
same
tax.
legislation.
Sales tax.
It says the income tax offsets have to be in the same legislation.
We've heard, though, from people who have concerns about prescription drugs, about their doctor's visits. Would you guys have preferred that it was written in there to be protected?
Please,
Absolutely,
yes, we like
yes.
detail. Go ahead, Amy.
There are no exemptions written into this. In fact, exemptions for real estate are taken out because of this amendment, taken out of the Constitution. So things like rent, there's nothing that will be in the Constitution protecting folks from having their rent subject to the sales tax or other real estate purchases. But beyond that, the governor has made a promise not to expand the sales tax to certain things, healthcare, agriculture, and real estate. But the governor may or may not be the person who's in office when lawmakers have this window of 5 years to make and expand the sales tax. And again, we're kind of going off onto tangents here and haven't really talked about what is happening to people, what will happen to people. If this is truly revenue neutral, this is not a tax cut. Most people won't see a tax cut. It is a tax shift. And it's a shift from wealthy folks who can arguably afford to pay more to the lowest income folks in the state, seniors, working families. An average Missouri family making somewhere between $65,000 a year and $70,000 a year is going to pay more than $500 more per year net.
Question. Is it
increase.
fair for a paycheck-to-paycheck wage earner to face a double tax, right? Every dollar they earn, tax, then they go to the store, tax. But if you're someone who you had a fabulous career, you're sitting on millions upon millions of dollars, you're not really paying income taxes anymore, you go get luxury services and you don't pay a tax. Is that a fair system?
Well, and you don't actually think that's fair. You know how I know? Because you were against the loopholes that were codified in the Constitution.
He's calling
in
this a
2016.
loophole. Well, hold on a
I am
minute.
saying
Hold
this
on.
is not going to help that. This will make it worse because to make up for the income tax loss, they still haven't shared a number of what the sales tax rate would go up to, if you notice that, or what it would expand to. They're just going off on tangents. But to make up for the loss of the income tax revenue, you have to go up to a sales tax rate that is higher than any other state.
That's not true even a
Sales
little
tax
bit.
Explain the math. I'm
Yeah.
actually
It
curious
is.
to hear. Explain
So
it.
$8.5 billion is what we have to replace.
7.8, but go ahead.
8.5 because you have to include the LLCs that file through the
I am.
individual
You've got to
income
count
tax.
refunds.
I'm going to
as
have to
well.
Sophie
And I
Cunningham
did.
you with a point of the finger if you keep this up. Please let her finish.
I do ask that we try not to talk over each
I'm
other.
interrupting a little bit less than you are.
Yes, and no finger pointing, please.
But I'd like to hear how the math works. I mean, you've
Okay,
made a claim.
the math is pretty easy. I mean, honestly, the math is pretty easy. So the 3% sales tax rate currently brings in just a fraction of what the income tax brings in. It brings in about $3 billion to general revenue each year. So if you're going to retain those $3 billion and get up to 11.5 billion because you've added in the cost of the income tax, you have to at least triple that rate. And then you add on local rates on top of that, and you get up to about an average 16% across the state and local
So you
rate.
said a big part of what we're trying to do
And-
is expand the sales tax base. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So,
but
so
we've
would you
looked
have to
at
triple?
those.
Would you have to triple the rate? Because currently the legislature could do exactly what you said
It
without a vote of
can't.
the people. It could triple the rate and reduce income taxes to zero currently because it would be a revenue neutral proposal. That's exactly what could happen.
There's nothing in the Hancock Amendment that says that that's okay.
Yes, there is. It's section 18E. I can recite it for you. I have it right here
If
on the
you
desk.
could do that already, you would be doing it, and you
No,
wouldn't
we
bring
wouldn't do
this
it
to
because
the
we have zero
Constitution.
interest in doing it.
I do-
We
So
are
I do
for
think
lower
it's
taxes and lower
important.
burdens.
Lauren.
I think it's
Respond to
important.
the
She's
numbers,
trying to have it both ways. She's saying on the one hand, we're going to tax everything. On the other hand, we're going to calculate what the rate has to be as if there's no change in what we're taxing. So you're trying to have it
Because
both
you
ways.
have shared no details.
There is no detail.
in this.
We have given them
It's
an
all
open
vague.
checkbook under Amendment 5. And this is an open checkbook, and they've removed the constitutional
That is
guardrails
objectively not
now
true.
in place.
The government
it is objectively
cannot
true.
grow. The government cannot grow.
But
Offsets have to be in the same piece of
I do want
legislation.
to ask Bishop Aaron directly, can you name 3 things that would be taxed that are not currently? For people who are wondering, what would tangibly change? Name 3 for us.
Sure. Tax attorneys, AI data, AI services, and I don't know, what's another good one? Massage therapist was comically said on the House floor.
And I think that's just really disingenuous because they're not sharing the details, and the reason is, and Missouri knows this, Missourians know this, that they're trying to hide the ball. You either give people the facts or not. And you are not giving people the facts. And talking about the Constitution the way it currently exists, the way you are, with all sorts of false information, is clearly you're hiding the facts from Missourians.
And I know
It's
you
not-
are all, I know you guys are all talking about real Missourians and the impact on real Missourians and what this will do for people that live here. So we do want to kind of, again, get a little more granular on that, turn our focus to who might feel the income tax relief and who might feel some of the transaction taxes and the pinch of that the most. And again, we have someone who had commented on that. Take a listen.
People making $1 million a year, household income or better, I don't think it'll hurt them as much. I think they can stand the pain. Anybody else, especially folks who live paycheck to paycheck, the working poor?
So Aaron, I know you're a numbers guy too. So let's take, again, a tangible here, a household making $70,000 a year. How do you believe Amendment 5 would impact them?
Yeah, I think a couple things. First of all, we have to understand what's the reason for doing this. We need to grow the pie. We need a faster growing economy. The White House Council of Economic Advisors, in January of this year, we did a study that looked at robust amounts of research that other academics have done, and we also did our own analysis and found that if you look at the income tax, it shrinks the pie. It means that people's paychecks don't grow as much. Right? When we compare the economic outcomes in Missouri compared to other states, why don't we do as well? Or is it just bad luck? Is it something in the water? No, it's because the tax policies aren't good and businesses aren't here as much. We need more businesses to drive up wages. So if I were looking at a household that's making about $70,000, I would expect them to come out about $3,000 ahead because they're going to have bigger paychecks and there's going to be less burden of government. And again, that's a key part of the amendment. There's a lot of discussion about, which revenue where does the revenue come from, but less discussion, which is really important, on the fact that we're going to control spending. Amendment 5 controls spending. Since 2019, government has doubled in spending. That will not continue going forward. So why is that important? Because this isn't a light switch. This isn't tomorrow after the amendment passes, suddenly the income tax is gone. It's a phase out. So if you look at over the course of several years, the economy is going to grow cumulatively by, let's say, 40%. That means all the other revenue sources generate 40% more money without having to change any kind of rates at all.
And so, as the economy grows, right, instead of that growth going into the coffers of the state, we want it to go back into the pockets of Missourians. I think one of the reasons that the Missouri Budget Project is against this is because of these very spending limits, because of the fact that it makes sure money goes back into the pockets of Missourians. It's the same reasons that they've been against tax reductions in the past.
Well, we have spending limits in the Constitution right now. It's called the Hancock Amendment. Missouri voters voted for it.
It's a revenue limit, that's not a spending limit.
We have those constraints in the Constitution already.
Do you support those?
Let me just say, though, that related to the study that you just mentioned, the Conservative Tax Foundation, an economist with the Conservative Tax Foundation, poked all sorts of holes in that study. He said it is absolutely wrong that you included a wide range of consumption that you're not legally able to tax, like services that nonprofits provide and health care that the government provides through Medicare and Medicaid. And they also said the actual revenue needed to replace the income tax would be closer to 17.5%. That's even higher than my estimate,
It's just wrong math.
And you're saying that the Conservative Tax Foundation that has the same goal as you of eliminating the income tax, they support that, by the way, eliminating the income tax. They said your study's wrong. They said
Yeah, I'm
that
saying
is
I'm
wrong.
saying that math is incorrect.
Well, and I've looked at your math.
And we've looked at your math.
And I am telling you, there's no way. The thing is, there's no way to make the numbers work without greatly increasing the sales tax and expanding the sales tax base to services that Missourians use absolutely every day. So we're talking.
A lot of Missourians are going numbers and math
Right.
and everything's swirling in their heads.
Yes.
I do want to ask you quickly about seniors and military
Yes.
families, though. How would Amendment 5 impact them? Currently, Social Security not taxed by income, for example.
Yeah, Social Security isn't taxed by income because we eliminated it in the legislature. The same legislature that you're saying can't be trusted with anything whatsoever, right? We eliminated income taxes on Social Security. We did it on capital gains. We did it on public pensions. We also did a property tax freeze for seniors as well. In fact, seniors are the ones who probably know best in the entire state the benefits of eliminating income taxes, which makes sense because it's seniors who are coming to us and saying we'd like to see those same benefits for our kids and our grandkids. In terms of those seniors who are living paycheck to paycheck, right, the most on the margins, the folks we should be looking out for most, something that's overlooked oftentimes is this is a tax reform amendment. It's not just about income taxes. It's also about reducing local tax rates, sales taxes, property taxes, and these are things that seniors are paying. There is a world in which you actually see an overall lower sales tax rate because of these local reductions. Guess who are still paying those? Seniors. And so we want to create benefits for them economically, but we also want to make sure that they're looked out for best, and you don't do that any better than making sure their kids and grandkids stay here in the state of Missouri.
So I've got to stop in there. I'm the oldest one at this table, I would guess. I just turned 65 last month.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I'm thinking, sitting here as the only senior citizen, I'm thinking about an elderly widow that's sitting there, and she's in her little apartment, and she's looking at pictures on the wall of happier memories, and she's sorting her bills, and she's got groceries, and she's got rent, and she's got utilities, and she's got doctor bills. Governor Kehoe, I heard him the other night on the telephone town hall you folks did, and he said, I'm looking out 30 years in the future, which is commendable for a governor, for any of you to do that. I'm thinking 30 days out for those seniors who are worried about in 30 days. Are they going to have enough, or are they going to have to choose between groceries or utilities? And now you're going to raise the tax on services that they pay, but they don't pay an income tax on Social Security.
They won't be paying
they don't get a
taxes on
benefit.
any essentials, right? They don't get taxed
I'd like
on
you to
Social
define
Security.
those essentials at this point, since you've been asking
Healthcare,
us questions.
agriculture, real estate.
And how do you define real estate?
How do I define real estate? Section 25 or Article 10 already prohibits transactions on real estate, and that's how I define real estate.
And you know what? The Missouri realtors you can thank for that. Now, I will tell you this about that. There's a lot more to real estate than what he's tried to indicate. If you go to buy or sell a home, and I know you're not for taxing buying or selling a home, surely, but that's a service. And when you do this, well, the tax on services from 2016, the ban on that could be home inspections. It could be anything related to the property. So I'd like you to drill down on that for me.
A $200 home inspection isn't the thing that's getting folks out of their homes. It's property taxes. And this is
you don't do a thing about that.
This is the clearest path and the clearest way for reforms and reductions of property taxes that Missouri has had in 40 years.
Is that guaranteed, though? For people who are wondering when they see the ads, is it guaranteed that property taxes will go down under this?
If the sales tax rate, right, or if the base is expanded, either one of those, then local political subdivisions have to reduce sales tax rates, property tax rates, in the instance of St. Louis and Kansas City, earnings tax rates.
Is it more likely they would reduce sales tax versus property taxes?
Sales taxes,
Let me-
taxes that seniors are paying, right?
Yes, so I think that it's much more likely that they would reduce the sales tax, because if the sales tax is expanded, and that is the revenue coming into the locality because of that expansion, they're more likely to want to reduce the rate to give people.
So what's your plan for reducing property tax rates?
We're going to have questions for you in a minute. Can you hold on and let her finish, please?
Careful, let's not talk over each other. Now make sure Aaron gets a word, too.
Right, and there is nothing in here, nothing that requires the elimination of property tax.
Well, no, we
But
haven't
I want to
pretended
go
that it
back
does.
to talking
Oh,
to...
you have.
No,
I'd
it's
rather-
Oh, your ads
that
have.
it reduces property taxes.
I would like to go back to talking about the impact on people, if we can, for a second, because, I think there's much to be said for the fact that it's not just Social Security income that is exempt from income tax in Missouri. It is public pensions up to the maximum Social Security amount. It is the income of active duty military and veterans. All of those, none of those folks get any significant tax reduction in this plan.
All of those
They will
folks get
only-
constitutional protection.
And they get higher
only
sales
see
taxes.
increases due to the expanded sales tax. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say that this is revenue neutral and you're not shifting the cost
You know why you
through
can?
sales
You know why you
tax.
can?
You
Because there's
can't-
43+ million non-Missourians that spend money in Missouri. You know why you can? Because it costs more to collect and administer an income tax than it does a sales tax. You know why
Absolutely
you can?
not.
You know why you can?
Absolutely
because you
not.
grow
That
the
is so not
economy
true.
instead of
Every
destroying
local
the economy,
business owner
and that
out there,
increases revenues.
every local business owner out there right now is rolling their eyes at what you just said because they know it's costly for them
Oh,
to
I'm
collect
talking about the
sales
state.
tax.
I'm talking about the
I have a
state.
question.
administration
Most
costs.
of
Does the Missouri,
Scott, one second. Let's hear from Eric
does the
for a moment, then I'll
Missouri
get to you.
budget project like the current sales tax base?
Do I like the
Are
current
you in
sales
favor?
tax
Like, do you
base?
think the current sales tax base is good as is?
Here's the thing: sales tax is the most regressive tax
That's not
that
the
you
question.
can. This is my answer to this.
Okay.
Is the most regressive tax that you can have. It's more regressive than property tax. It's more regressive than income
And it's
tax.
especially regressive
that
because
is
we don't
Excuse me, let her
have
finish,
anything
please.
more.
Please
and
let her
that
finish.
is because it takes a bigger chunk out of people's incomes the lower your income is. And there are studies across the nation that show that. And in fact, some of these states that you point to, like Texas and Tennessee, if you look at the tax disbursement by income level, in Missouri, you're absolutely right. Lowest income folks in Missouri pay the most in tax in the state. Currently, they pay about 10% in their income in state and local taxes, while the wealthiest pay 5.7%. In Texas and Tennessee, those lower income folks pay 13% of their income in state and local taxes, while the wealthiest folks drop to about 3%.
But Lauren,
I've been very patient to hear your answer out there, but I did not hear an answer. Do you support the current sales tax base? Do you think it should stay as it currently is?
So my answer is that I would like to move away from a sales tax base entirely because it hurts the lowest income folks the most.
So what
We're
does that mean?
asking more of middle income folks and lower income folks. I'd get rid of sales tax.
Excuse me just a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa.
I think we should
Are you
stay on
asking the
Amendment
questions
5.
or is Lauren asking
Yes.
the questions here? Because I got a question or two for you guys.
I'll
What's
gladly-
Missouri Promise? You've attacked who she's with. What's Missouri Promise? That's
We're
who
not
you
with
guys
Missouri
are.
Promise.
Oh, you're not with them, but they're running all these ads that are scaring people.
The reason it's important.
We will get into that.
Well, thank you.
The reason
If
I'm
we
asking
get to
about the
ask
sales tax
questions, I'll
base
be
is it
glad
goes
to.
to the issue of credibility. The Missouri Budget Project was actively against the 2016 amendment that froze the sales tax base in time. And I understand why, because again, if you're a manufacturer, you're subject to the sales tax. If you're an AI company, you get to get away from the sales tax. If you're someone who buys, most of your budget goes to necessities, you're subject to the sales tax, and your paycheck is taxed. If you're a high-income person who's sitting on a big kind of pile of money and you go to luxury services, you're not subject to tax. So what I want to understand is why was the Missouri Budget Project against it before, but is now being silent or maybe flip-flopping in terms of their
Oh,
support?
wait a minute. Hold it. Well, please let me
Yes.
answer that. I debated with her in 2016. They were not for it. But that's not what this
they're
discussion's
against it.
about. That's not what this discussion's about, and you are pivoting and getting away from
You're
it.
the one who brought up that section of the Constitution.
I'm bringing it up now, and I'm bringing it up again because these guys with Amendment 5, they blow out the constitutional safeguards the people put in place.
No, we
You
do not.
absolutely
The government
do.
cannot
And I know-
grow
You get a
single dollar.
license to ignore
I know
them.
there's a lot to talk about, and obviously a lot of historical knowledge you guys are bringing in as well too. But we want to really try and focus on the future if Amendment 5 passes and what's on the table right now. You guys have already touched on this a lot, and we do have a state lawmaker here at the table. So we're talking about this idea of what would the lawmakers be empowered to do? What would their job number one be when the legislative session gets back in if Amendment 5 passes? And we asked the governor about this as well, sort of this idea of whether or not people trust their lawmakers. Take a listen. think people actually do trust their lawmakers right now?
Well, they're the men and ladies they elected to represent them down here. And again, they're the same representative or senator you see at your son or daughter's basketball game, in the grocery store, at church, and it gives Missourians a real connection to talk to those people.
Okay, Bishop, this one is directly targeted for you again as our state representative at the table here. You're the sponsor of this bill that is making Amendment 5 come to be, in some ways an architect of the plan. Why should people trust you and your colleagues moving forward in Jeff City?
Yeah, I think it's normal for anyone who's been entrusted with a responsibility, right, to want to be worthy of the trust that's been given to them, right? That's normal and that's desired, and I think that colleagues of mine, myself, we do our best to be able to be worthy of that trust. Amendment 5 does not count on that trust. What it says is it constitutionally limits the legislature in a very narrow way, very guardrailed way. It says the government cannot grow as we set about enacting the plan to eliminate income taxes here in the state of Missouri, as we set about promoting economic growth instead of continuing on the same path of decay that we've been on for decades. You want to talk about those who are lower income? The real question isn't proportions or that or comparisons or numbers. The real question is, can they afford more or less than what they could last year? That's the real question.
Absolutely.
And you fix that, you help that, by bringing more money, more economic activity, more opportunities so that they can see wage increases and so that they can see price decreases here in the state of Missouri. It's not going to come from some silver bullet that the government solves. It's going to come from creating the environment for an economy to now support and advance and raise the standard of living for those who are existing.
And just to add to that, we really kind of have three choices here. So we can either stick with the status quo. Right, and this is a status quo where people are double taxed if they're making a paycheck, but if they're on the very top end, they're not taxed really at all. Or we can go in the direction of Texas and Tennessee and Florida, which are growing much more quickly than Missouri. And if you talk about post-COVID, how many news stories are out there on all the people who moved to Missouri? Not many news stories, because all those people were going to Tennessee and they were going to Florida. In fact, in some of those years after COVID, 70% more Missourians were moving to Tennessee compared to the number of Tennesseans moving to Missouri. So that's a direction we can go, is we can see what succeeds and go in that direction. Or there's the third option, which is we can go in the Illinois direction or the New York direction or the California direction. In fact, you just alluded to the idea of having a more progressive income tax, higher tax rates. Well, if we do the California model, what happens? Cost of living soars.
I didn't say anything about that. I did not say anything about a higher income tax.
So what state do you like, tax-wise?
I didn't say anything about. First of all, we're not talking about that. That is not what Amendment 5 is about, first of all. But secondly, I didn't say anything about increasing income tax. What I said is I would move away from sales tax. What you guys are talking about is doubling down on sales tax, which is going to make it harder for people to live here. The people with middle incomes, people with low incomes are going to struggle. We're talking about doubling down on sales tax on groceries, on gasoline, on all of the products and services that Missourians need to be able to feed and clothe their families, to take care of their needs, and to thrive. If you're not doubling down on that, then you're cutting services like education and healthcare and mental health services in our communities that also help our families thrive.
No, Texas, it's not doubling down.
Who is the model? Who is the model in your mind? Who should we be following?
Well, let me just say something. You keep talking about Tennessee. You keep talking about Tennessee.
Okay.
Tennessee, I just saw this yesterday. CNBC rankings put Missouri at number 5 for the cost of doing business. Tennessee's number 9. CNBC ranked Tennessee dead last, number 50 for quality of life. And I'll say something to everybody else out there who's working hard and looking forward to Friday. The Tennessee tax on beer is 21 times more than Missouri's. Now, I don't want to. I just don't want to hit the working people with this.
Are the people who are moving from Missouri to Tennessee stupid?
Are they doing it because of an income tax? Is that your whole thing? This says the quality of life is number 50. Surely there's more to that than just this.
Are we going to trust some media conglomerate? Or are we going to trust actual people moving?
Please,
are we going to
media
trust
conglomerate.
Actual income moving?
What about Kansas? That state comes
How
up
about
a lot.
Kansas?
What do you guys think about the Kansas model? How is this different?
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because this is absolutely nothing like Kansas. Right? There's two issues with what Kansas did. Number one is they cut the tax first kind of blindly and hoped it would work out. Cut first, then do the math. That's not what this does at all. Amendment 5 says the tax rate comes down from revenue growth triggers, right? If the revenue doesn't allow it, then the rate doesn't come down or it comes down slower. So that's the first thing. Second thing is Kansas actually did it by creating their own loophole. They didn't cut income taxes uniformly. They created an exception where if you had certain types of income, you didn't get taxed and other types you did. So this is nothing like that. And again, I wait to hear what is the model. You're either saying that everything's great in Missouri, you clearly don't like the Texas, Tennessee, Florida model. What's the model you want to pursue? Because we've been bottom 10
We should quit running Missouri down,
And
by the way.
Yes, right? I would say that Amendment 5 doesn't require that answer. What you've done is you've compared apples to oranges, and you know this. Texas and Florida and Tennessee all have different sources of revenue for the state that Missouri would not have. Texas has oil. We're not going to suddenly, sprout oil in the state of Missouri. That's not here. We already know that. So, Florida and Tennessee, part of the reason why people are moving there and part of the reason people moved after COVID is we had a spike in retirements. There were people taking early retirement during COVID, and they were moving to warmer climates, including Florida, and it's all about the beaches.
So why are the businesses moving to Dallas?
Who's running this? Are you doing the questions?
Who's
doing the questions?
We're
Are you
having a
taking
conversation. I do think it is time to move on, though.
Yes.
Obviously, from looking at other states, this will impact Missouri. So let's try and focus a little bit more on that. A lot of people that we've heard from are talking about these ads that are running both for and against Amendment 5. So we do want to take a quick sample so you can listen to a couple of those.
Under Amendment 5, the politicians' hidden tax shift plan, there'll be up to 8 losers for every 2 winners.
But it ain't fair you pay all those taxes while big corporations pay almost nothing.
A lot of people talking about the Missouri Mule there. So how exactly, for Bishop and Aaron, how exactly would Amendment 5 make corporations pay their fair share?
Yeah, so what the Missouri Budget Project was against 10 years ago is Section 26 of Article 10. What it did is it codified loopholes. It froze our sales tax in time. And it said that any new things, right, that ever develop, including AI, right, can't be taxed.
And how is the business paying that?
Pardon?
How is the business going to pay a sales tax? Because the business doesn't pay
AI
the sales tax.
services currently can't have a sales tax
And
on them
the business doesn't
because
pay,
of the constitutional amendment that you were against 10 years ago.
But the business won't pay the sales tax. The user will. The person in Missouri sitting at home.
Are you talking about the way that the user would pay the income tax?
This does
you're
nothing
saying it gets passed
with
on?
the
Man, you are
corporate
talking
income
so
tax.
fast and spinning so hard.
I think the question is, how would the corporations actually pay more, not the consumer? And you're mentioning one specific example. Are you here committed to say AI or data centers will in fact be taxed moving forward?
Yeah, that's an easy commitment. I'm very much in favor of a fair tax system. Have always been. My
Although
voting record proves
they
it.
already have 15-year sales tax exemptions
Show me where my vote was for that.
the legislature
Show me where my vote was
I believe
You're not
Mike
the only
Kehoe was one of the ones who
Show me
voted
where my
for it.
vote
Mike
was for
Parson
that.
was one of them.
I was just asked, show me where my vote
Yes,
is.
but I'm telling you, you are not the only legislator. You've got a whole lot of other people, almost 200 other people that you have to get that through. And I am saying they already have their exemption. I think it's disingenuous.
I got to add something. May I just inject one thing here? This 5 years of just ignoring the Hancock
It's
Amendment.
not ignoring the Hancock Amendment. It's
It is,
literally made
but
up.
may I finish? The 5 years of ignoring the Hancock Amendment, there's going to be an election in 2026 this fall. I believe you're on the ballot. 2028, we even have a governor's race, plus the legislature, half the Senate, all of the House. There's an election in 2030. That's all that time span. You're pretty confident that you're going to be sitting in that chair, aren't you? All right,
That I'm gonna be sitting
just
in
preempt
that
the voters. You're going to preempt the voters
Sitting
and
in
say
what chair?
the legislative chamber, that chair where you're one of 163. Are you confident you're going to be there?
I think
This is why
I've been elected 3 times, and every time I said I was out to eliminate income taxes. I have done what I said to my constituents.
But you can't say that for 162 other members.
I've done my greatest effort. What you just asked if I'm confident, right?
If you're confident, but you know what? You're going to be term limited, I guess, at some point,
Big
right?
picture,
in the
though.
House.
Beyond Bishop in his term.
The entire premise that Amendment 5 is about trusting legislators is completely flipped on its head. It's completely inaccurate. The reality is
what?
Explain to me where I'm wrong.
So let me
I'll tell you where you're
pose
wrong.
a different question that was sort of back on topic. topic. Let me pose a different question. For people who go, how can corporations be taxed more and still want to move to Missouri? Is that incongruous, or how can you explain
So here's how it works. Right now, the entire burden of the sales tax falls on just a subset of industries. If you're a manufacturer, like we want factories, we want blue collar workers, we want to make stuff, right? We're supply chains, we don't want to be reliant on China, et cetera. You face the entire sales tax. If you're an AI company, you face nothing. Does it make any sense to, in the Constitution, say if you're manufacturing, you face it, and if you're AI, you don't?
But that's not even accurate, because manufacturing has sales tax exemptions.
Do you? No, the products that they're manufacturing is not true. We're not talking about company to company.
Well, I am, because you talked in the commercial about corporations paying their fair share.
We're talking about the goods and services that they offer. We're offering tax incentives to AI service providers.
And what this means is that the individual Missourians pay that sales tax. I pay that sales tax to the company when I get a product. I pay the sales tax to the
You mean in the same way that you pay the income taxes behind that good and service too?
It's going to be the everything tax. It's the everything tax. They're playing hide the sales tax. That is the shift here. It is going to be a much bigger
Currently, there's
tax.
one tax that influences and inflates the cost of every single good and service, and that is income
sales
taxes.
tax.
No.
Sales tax. Sales and use tax.
I thought there were exemptions on sales tax. Wait a second. I thought
well,
we
he
codified
thinks
70%
a
of the
loophole
exemptions.
is someone getting a haircut. That's a loophole.
No. I thought there were exemptions. Is it the everything tax or isn't it?
It is the everything tax, and it's a whopper.
The only thing that inflates the cost of goods and services everywhere is income taxes.
That only assumes if
I will
if the
cede control
company.
back to Laura.
We are
Laura, and I
coming to
think
the
we
end
should.
of our time. There
I'm
is
so
obviously
sorry.
a lot
Thank
to talk about
Yes,
with all this, but
so much.
very, very quickly, I do want to touch on one final point, which is about the money that is being spent to talk to Missouri voters about both sides of Amendment 5. And some of that money has come from dark money groups, particularly on the supporter side. So we wanted to kind of talk with you guys a little bit about that. Obviously, I know you're not with Missouri Promise and that PAC that is doing that. But why shouldn't voters get to know who is behind these amendments? Should they disclose who is actually donating to them?
I mean, I think all groups should follow the law, but again, I'm not representing any group. I'm here on behalf of the White House. I can't speak to that issue. And I don't know, nothing else to say about that.
Do you think that group should come out and say who their donors are?
Does the Missouri Budget Project disclose all of its donors?
Yes.
Does it disclose? Does it disclose all of its donors? Yeah. So the same laws
We're
are being
a
followed.
nonprofit.
The same laws are being followed.
They are not being followed because they have not disclosed
Wait,
it.
are
We
you
also
accusing them of breaking the law?
I'm saying
questioning
they're
it.
getting money from out of state, which the same bunch of people who put Amendment 5 on the ballot put Amendment 4 on the ballot, and they go on all day about dark money.
The only people who are paid by donors here are on the opposition of this table. That's true.
Oh, come on. Everybody, I admire anybody who gets to work for a living, and that you shouldn't begrudge people that.
I'm not begrudging them. I'm just saying, you're asking a question
folks,
of two people that don't work for any organization.
This is an important point, and you're seeing it right here. This is the show me state. We're not the trust politician state, and you see why.
Yeah, we're not the trust politician state, which is why this Constitution. It's been said that this is 5 years. It's very smug.
You know,
I wouldn't give them 5 minutes of that kind of authority.
5 years, right, of Hancock being suspended. That's factually not true.
It is not factually
Hancock
untrue.
says.
Do the people get a vote on what you're going to produce?
The people only get to vote if it is revenue generating. That's what Hancock says.
So you're not going to give them a vote on whatever the legislature does after all this. When you get this open checkbook from the people.
The people don't vote.
He just said it. They're not going to get a vote. They're not going to give them a vote on this.
I'm happy to share.
It is time for our closing argument. So let's put it that way, okay? Because it is time to wrap up this important discussion for Missouri voters. And obviously, I want you guys to all be able to talk about also where people can find more information if they are interested in voters who want to learn more. So we started with the supporters of the amendment. We're going to end with those who are opposed. So Bishop, Aaron, again, for the voter who is heading to the polls, who wants to know which way, yes or no, they should vote, what is your final pitches to them?
Yeah, so you've heard a lot of bumper stickers today, kind of roll off the tongue, but let's talk about the actual reality, which is that we want Missouri to be a thriving state. That is the goal. Unfortunately, we just flat out aren't. We haven't been. For 25 years, we've been typically in the bottom 10. So something's not working. We need to change it. We can look to other states that are doing a great job. You can look to places like Tennessee, for example. And if we move away from the income tax, which is a direct penalty on work, it's a direct penalty on investment, it's a direct penalty on innovation, then what we can get is we can have more businesses in Missouri. That pushes up wages and creates more prosperity for people. So that's one big reason. We want to grow the pie in Missouri. The second thing is we have a nearly 100-year-old tax code that is rigged against regular paycheck to paycheck people. Right now, you face the ×2 everything tax. Right? First, the tax comes out of your paycheck, then you go to the store, then you pay tax again. If you're a business that makes things, you face a tax. Meanwhile, if you're someone who is sitting on piles and piles of money, you're not really paying much income tax, and when you go and you take place with luxury services and things like that, you're not taxed there either. We tax manufacturers, we don't tax AI. It's a very antiquated system. It's not working. There's a model that does work, and that's why you should vote yes on Amendment 5.
Bishop, quickly, final thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, someone asked me at a town hall, they said, who benefits most from this? And I think there are real benefits in 18 months, in 2 years. But I think there are greater benefits in 5 years, and in 10 years, and in 50 years. And so when I think about who benefits most, it's whichever Missourians are born on August 5th of 2026. We have been on a slow sliding decay economically, and we can feel it. Gas prices are up, houses are up, healthcare is up, education is up, wages are stagnant. This is not working. The system that we have isn't working, and it intuitively makes sense. You get less of what you tax, and right now we're taxing productivity. If we can encourage productivity here in this state, that means better jobs, that means more goods and services, and more goods and services mean lower prices as well. It directly addresses affordability from both sides if we can take this step to benefit every generation of Missourian.
Scott, your final thoughts, please.
Well, let me defer to Amy then.
Okay.
So I would say, look, this is, there's no silver bullet. The economy doesn't work that way. It doesn't work in isolation. There's not one tax that creates an economic boom. That just doesn't happen. What matters the most, and there's a recent study by the Urban Institute indicating this, is the quality of education and how accessible education is. That matters the most in terms of wage growth. And this experiment that we're talking about is really shifting the tax burden onto 80% of Missourians in order to give the 20% of the wealthiest a cut. Most Missouri families are going to face a $500 tax increase at least, net tax increase, and seniors, veterans, active duty military are going to be even more impacted. So we would urge people to listen to the teachers and folks who care about and who are working with us on this, include teachers groups and retired teachers and PTAs and the educators generally, but also nonprofits and health and mental health service providers and others who care, groups that advocate for seniors like AERP.
Amendment 5 is a bait and switch. That's simply what it is. They've played hide the sales tax throughout this program and throughout the campaign. It would move the burden. It is reverse Robin Hood. It would move the burden from the income tax for the wealthy to raising a sales tax on services we use every day and goods we use every day. That's wrong. It's a misplaced priority to do that to Missouri senior citizens and veterans and others. Vote no. These politicians don't trust you to follow the constitutional mandates that you have voted for in Missouri. So I say trust yourself, don't trust the politicians. Vote no on Amendment 5.
I am very, very grateful to all of you for the time today. Again, in the very spirited conversation, thank you very much for being here. Of course, there is this reminder, no excuse absentee voting is underway right now. The primary is August 4th. Again, we want to thank our panelists for joining us for this discussion. This has been Amendment 5, Your Money, Your Choice.